Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Inside segment. I'm Harold Fisher. The political temperature is rising. Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett is surging in the Lone Star State. Early voting is underway ahead of next week's primary in Texas as she eyes a seat in the U.S. Senate, shaking up the race and turning heads nationwide. Now, at the same time, there is a question hanging over the 2028 presidential race. Is former Vice President Kamala Harris preparing for another run at the White House? There's new scrutiny over the Epstein files. Every day, there's new scrutiny over the Epstein files, as we know. Bill and Hillary Clinton going before a House Oversight Committee in Chappaqua, New York, today and tomorrow. And of course, we must talk about the BAFTA controversy. Was it oversight? Was it outright disrespect toward Black talent? Was it racism? And of course, the final farewell begins for the Reverend Jesse Jackson. It is time for some real talk and sharp political analysis. Let's get into it. My guests are Dr. Avis Jones-Weaver, political analyst and principal and founder of Nouveau Strategies, and Dr. Marcus Board, associate professor of political science at Howard University. Thank you both for joining this conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's talk about some news that came out today about early voting data ahead of the Tuesday primary, the U.S. Senate primary in Texas. CNN is reporting that 60% more votes have been cast this time than were cast in the 2020 Democratic presidential primary. That's the last statewide primary in Texas that featured a major competitive Democratic contest. Avis, I'll start with you. You know, she's surging. The polls are also saying that she is ahead of James Tallarico, who is also a Democrat running in this primary. What say you about where we are with Jasmine Crockett?
I think Jasmine can do it. But it's just interesting to see the surge. What the surge writ large is showing us is that there's just way more enthusiasm on the Democratic side of the ledger than on the Republican side of the ledger. I think a lot of Republicans are now a lot of them are sort of hiding their heads in shame. Although it's shocking to me that anybody could be surprised because this man tells you exactly what he's going to do before he does it. However, you are seeing a lot of energy on the opposite side, looking to get rid of him. And specifically with regards to Jasmine, I just think people are ready for fighters. I mean, how many ways does the Democratic electorate has to show the sort of regular sort of egghead Democrats that really what we need at this moment are people that are going to stand up with steel in their spine and fight. And so I think to the extent that we're seeing a bit of a surge for her in terms of the polls, at least, I think is reflective of that. It's also reflective of a very strong Black vote in Texas that is solidly behind her. And even though Texas is a very diverse state, we just have to talk real deal brass tacks about who can and can't vote. Yes, there's a lot of Latinos in Texas, but honestly, not all of them can vote because you have to be a citizen to vote. And so to the degree that there is an advantage there for Jasmine, she has the Black vote that is going to be leaning in her way. And she also then has a disproportionate number of people who legally can vote, who has the ability to vote for her.
So, and I think you make a very profound point when you talk about Latino voters, even though those who are eligible to vote, there were some numbers that came out just a couple of weeks ago saying that those Latino voters who may have traditionally voted Republican because of issues regarding immigration nationwide, that maybe, Marcus, maybe they're saying, time to switch.
Yeah, there was a book about the 2006 immigration protests that Krista Peta Milan wrote called Latino Mass Mobilization. One of the big things that he talked about was how there's this group of people who come from all these different places, have these different backgrounds and histories, but generally have different relationships to politics. And how these moments where parties like the Republican Party and Donald Trump right now galvanize them around particular issues, that's when they show up. That's when they become more of a group that you can count on in elections. And so I think Jasmine Crockett is kind of stepping into this at the perfect time, as Dr. Avis was saying, stepping into this at the perfect time as a fighter, as somebody who says, hey, you know what? This Black woman didn't win. A lot of people are pointing and looking at your group to say, what did you have to do for it? And right now, you're kind of the target of a lot of organized operations to get you out of the country. You put those things together, she's got a real shot. I saw a video online of somebody crying, looked like a white lady, crying, saying, I really wanted to vote for Jasmine Crockett. I believe in her, but I just don't think she can win. And so there is this prevailing sentiment, the ongoing issue of thinking that the only people that can win are white men. Now, Tallarico is not a bad candidate. I'm going to be real transparent about that. He's not a bad candidate. He's not a non-fighter, but he does look visibly like more of the same. So there's a question of whether or not either of them can, shake up the Senate. But, we'll find out real soon.
I just realized after looking up this information, the last time Texas had a Democratic senator was Lloyd Benson, who left office in 1993. Dare I say, Avis, last century.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of remember when Beto was drawing all these huge crowds, and everyone thought that he was finally going to be the one to slay Ted Cruz. And once again, he fell short. So it's interesting to me that the barometer is that it has to be what is at least a white appearing male who would have the opportunity to win statewide in Texas if you're a Democrat, when we've yet to see since Lloyd Benson, even a white appearing male be able to do that. So, if one thing that I believe, for example, that Obama showed and demonstrated, and I believe that Kamala demonstrated, given how well she did in a short amount of time that she had, is that, the time of, necessarily waiting until someone tells you that it's your turn never comes for people who look like us. Okay. You have to take your turn. And particularly now, I know this day we're reflecting on Jesse Jackson as well, Reverend Jesse Jackson. He's someone who took his turn and made some huge changes in the whole infrastructure of the party because of it. And so change comes when people move based on their vision for change rather than given a permission slip to move. And so the point is, you can't win if you don't run. And if she runs, it's up to us to make sure that she wins.
Well, that's I think that again is such a great point where you can, go all the way back to the civil rights movement where, even, President Lyndon Baines Johnson was telling, Dr. King, wait, and we saw, what happened by King and others at that time not waiting, as risky as it was politically, physically, the whole bit. But I think the thing that strikes me about Jasmine Crockett is her quick wit supported by full-throated intellect. That is not, you have all kinds on Capitol Hill. As we know, we have all kinds. But when she has gotten angry at Marjorie Taylor Greene, we have seen a withering clap back, or when she has been, questioning, when she was questioning Pam Bondi on Capitol Hill, if I had a choice between having her as a friend or an enemy, I would definitely want her as a friend because I don't look as slow as I am. I don't I don't want anybody eating me alive like that. But do you think that Texas voters are ready for that, or because some people will see that just as unconventional as a Donald Trump, and so because he has normalized unconventional campaigning, maybe folks are used to it and saying, "Oh, she's okay. I will give her a consideration now."
Well, you got to be thoughtful about the fact that it's a two-party system. So the reality is you have one candidate, one party that is dominating American politics, that has dominated Texas for a very long time, as we just pointed out. And you need to know what type of fighter you're going to get on the other side. So yeah, her greatest hits list is longer than a few people, right? But like, you want somebody, especially in this moment, who can actually say something, speak up, stand up for themselves, knows how to fight. And it's one of the big criticisms of the Democratic Party more broadly right now, is that they don't know how to fight. They don't know how to stand on business. They know how to cower. They know how to capitulate. They know how to find some type of compromise, but they don't know how to fight. She clearly does, and she's nobody's dummy. And so if you're going to have somebody in that office in the state of Texas, where there are a significant number in a statewide office, there's a significant number of people who want to vote for the Democratic Party, this gives you that option. And you know what they say about messing with Texas.
I also think it's important to look at the demographics of Texas. Texas is already a majority people of color state. Okay. White people are the minority in Texas. I mean, most people don't even think about that. But just when you come to sheer numbers, white people are the minority in Texas. You have the largest block by population of Black people in any state in the nation in Texas. Okay. Now, it is a large number of Latinos in Texas as well. But once again, we don't oftentimes talk about these numbers because it sounds almost, I don't know, maybe people consider it racist to talk about it, but I'm just saying this factually. I'm not calling anyone any names, but the reality is there is a large proportion of the Latino population in Texas and around the nation also that have not completed their citizenship process. Let me say that. Okay. And so they can't vote. All right. And so when I'm looking at the people, the electorate, the potential electorate in Texas of those whom can vote, you have white people, you have this large, who are the minority in that state. You have this large block of Black people. And then you do have a swath of the Latino population as well, but not all of the Latinos who are voting age in Texas even can vote because of the citizenship issue. We never talk about that, but that is facts. And so if you have a candidate that can really expand the electorate among those who are capable of voting because they are energized about the candidate in the same way that Obama expanded the electorate. And let's also be real, in the same way that Trump expanded the electorate among white folk, okay, who typically don't vote. It takes a magnetic and energizing candidate to do that. And I believe that Jasmine has the ability to do that. And if you look at the demographics of Texas in the way that I have laid that out, I think you would be very short-sighted to say that it's impossible for her to win. It is possible for her to win, but she's going to need to be able to have that really big energizing element that makes sure that those people who can vote do vote. Because one of the reasons why we've seen such a strong Republican bloc in Texas in terms of elected officials is that disproportionately white folk vote in that state. And also you have a lot of gerrymandering that have been going on in that state that expands the voting power of the white population. But in a statewide election like this, I think she has a chance.
Yeah, and I want you to think about this question, both of you, and then I'm going to take a break and we'll come back. With that said, Avis, is there a concern about possible chaos, foolishness, and shenanigans around talk about nationalizing elections.
Mhm.
Think about that. We'll be back in just a bit. Don't forget, you can hear this in every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is coming up next on WHUR-FM. This conversation continues on Sirius XM Channel 141 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our political conversation. We are talking about a whole lot that is on deck this week. Of course, right now we're talking about Jasmine Crockett and the Democratic primary in Texas. The Clintons are testifying before the House Oversight Committee regarding the Epstein files. We're going to talk about Kamala Harris and some other issues as well. My guests are Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeaver, political analyst. She is also principal and founder of Nouveau Strategies, and Dr. Marcus Board, associate professor of political science at Howard University. Before the break, I was asking about some of these discussions around nationalizing elections. The president has certainly been testing the waters in those kinds of conversations. And so we know, for example, Avis, you were talking about, Black voters. We talk about Harris County around Houston, Texas, for example. One of the biggest voting blocks in the state. Your thoughts about that, and Marcus. After that, I want to hear what you have to say as well, please.
Well, we have the power to really be able to, if you ask me, turn just about any election if we really maximize it, particularly given where we are located, specifically as relating to presidential elections, where we're located in key states and we're centered oftentimes in those urban areas. And if we maximize our vote, oftentimes we can more than account for the margin of victory. Now, what he's doing, though, right now is he's trying to, it sounds like, create an executive order that would pretty much mirror what they were trying to get through Congress with regards to this act that was SAVE Act, I believe it was, that was specifically meant to make it honestly harder for people to vote. Any woman who has been married and has changed her name as a result, her last name is going to be different than what's on her birth certificate. So this could literally disenfranchise millions of women. Most Americans, unfortunately, do not have a passport. And if you do need a passport, it's not free. Like, it costs over $100. In essence, it's a poll tax, which is it's like against the Constitution. It's non-constitutional. So it's going to be an interesting challenge to see if he does this, how fast can we see some resolution about this in the court, and if it makes it all the way to the Supreme Court, that would and they sort of verify it, that would be a huge constitutional crisis. Because clearly the Constitution says that you can't have poll taxes. And that, in essence, in my estimation, is exactly what this will call for.
That's right. Marcus, Avis makes a great point. I mean, unless you're doing some international travel or in the vernacular of the streets, if we outside and, with your passport, but if you're not outside and don't plan on going outside of the country, and as she said, you need to, what is it, $165 for a passport, $185, something like that. I need to get mine renewed because I want to be outside this summer. Go ahead, Mark.
So there's a few things. As you know, I'm a democracy fellow here at the Kennedy School this year. And one of the things we talked about today was how around the world, a lot of countries, advanced democracies, require some form of identification. Now, that doesn't mean that is in line with the United States and the principles of the Constitution. But what it means is that the Republican Party, which has for the entirety of my lifetime, our lifetimes, and pretty much as long as they have been who they are, have had a better ground game than the Democratic Party. They have been more invested in their strategizing than the Democratic Party. They've been more successful than the Democratic Party across the board in a number of ways, not just because of voter disenfranchisement, but because they just run a better party. It's a little bit like the Oklahoma City Thunder or the Spurs in the NBA versus, the Wizards, right? Like, some organizations, they just don't run well. The Republican Party does. And
oh my
they
God.
do.
Oh my God.
I'm just saying.
The shade. Wow.
We
Shots fired.
said we was
Oh,
outside. I said I thought this was. I thought we were in the trust tree. My
that,
point is, that organization has a long history of doing things that are just like beyond the fray, like outside the fold. We're just like, what is going on over there? And it works for them because they planned for this, they plotted for this, they strategized for it, and of course, they have the money to make it work. Do I think that this one is going to go through as they intend? No, it kind of seems like Trump is hedging his bets and trying to say, well, if things don't go my way, I'll say it's because they didn't let me do this thing. It'll galvanize his base for the next presidential election, which for all we know, he's going to run in. But the idea of checks and balances and trusting the courts to come around and all that stuff, I think to Dr. Avis' point, we are in the middle of a reshaping. The reshaping of America and American politics is extraordinary right now, and we by a mile are not behind the wheel, right? So I think right now we are fighting, and we need to stand up for ourselves. We need to make sure our voices are heard, but we also have to be thoughtful and strategic about, okay, if this thing does go the way that we might expect it to go, how are we going to be prepared to push back in the future? And the answers are unclear, and they always have been, but we got to figure something out.
Marcus, let's talk about Kamala Harris. She only had 107 days when she ran and lost to Donald Trump during the last presidential election cycle. Mm-hmm. Now, it seems at least once a month there is a discussion or a flirtation or a hint or a tease about what she may or may not do in 2028. Well, that's only 2 years away, and this is around the time when most presidential candidates, right around, I don't know, within the next 6 months, we will know who is in and who is out. What do you think about this? Is she teasing? Look into your magic ball, Marcus, and say, or do you think she's really seriously thinking about it?
I think, since I'm on my basketball references, Chris
here we
Paul
go.
got to the NBA Finals one time, and afterwards he said, "I'm addicted to it. I need it. Like, this is, now that I've gotten there, I got to get it again." And he never got back. So I think Kamala Harris might be in a very similar place where she's been to the big show. She's been in the White House. She's been right there, right on the doorstep, just like Joe Biden was, and he couldn't hold himself back. He held back one election. I think she wants it again, and I'm not sure she's going to be able to get it. I think the sexy answer is that she's definitely going to run. She's gonna show up. She's gonna show out. She's gonna complete the job. She's gonna do the work that she wanted to do the first time. She's gonna distance herself from Biden, and now that she has this space and this runway, she's gonna make it happen. The less sexy answer, based on what I would say is just a history of political science, is that candidates in her position very rarely succeed. People have trouble backing them after they have lost. People have trouble supporting a candidate who they invested so much in, even if it was 107 days. And so I think that a better fit, in my very humble opinion, I think a better fit for her would be to become the first Black woman governor of the United States. That is not me trying to put a ceiling on Kamala Harris. Do I think she could be the president and be amazing at it? Absolutely. Do I think that is a realistic possibility for a candidate that last time she was in a full field didn't get out of the box? No, I don't think it's realistic.
Avis?
Yeah, I do think she's going to run again. I don't get the sense that she's interested in running for governor. She's definitely not done anything to indicate that. I would love to see her as governor. I don't think she's interested in that. And the polling that I've seen on this that have looked at potential candidates have both her and Gavin Newsom within a point of each other at the top of the list. All right. So there are still people out there that are willing to support her. Now, is it going to be hard? Hell yeah. I think that this country has shown. I heard, what was it? Michelle Obama was asked about this, if she was going to run, and she said, no, clearly this nation never wants to vote for a woman. And I would say even further, it's going to be hard for me to see if, it would be something where it would be possible for her to really break that ceiling, not only as a woman, but as a Black woman. It's going to be super hard for her. But I do believe that she's going to give it a try. I think it's within her right to give it a try. And similar to what I said about Jasmine, it's just one of those situations where you cannot wait for people to give you permission. You just have to go. And then when she goes, we'll see what happens.
So to that point, when we look at, some of the things that happened during that 107 days, how Vice President Kamala Harris, in some of the interviews, she was not always 10 toes down on something, and that was one of the big criticisms, even within the Democratic Party, was say, you have to have, particularly up against a Donald Trump, you have to have a I said what I said kind of mentality.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that interview that she had with Oprah Winfrey, where she said, if somebody tries to break into my house, they will get shot. She said, I'm a gun owner. And that, I think, is illustrative of the kind of, I said what I said, 10 toes down. If you don't like it, too bad. But there weren't a lot of moments like that, as opposed to a Jasmine Crockett, when I pull up, my dictionary, and I look up, I said what I said. There's a picture of her, right?
Mm-hmm.
The picture of Jasmine Crockett right there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when you're talking about, the modern politics, Avis, I think that's where we are. Marcus talked about, they want a fighter.
They want a fighter. They also want someone, honestly, who's not seen as being the traditional Democratic candidate. I think that, for example, my youngest son, who's a graduate student right now at UVA, called me the other day to let me know that he is now officially a card-carrying member of the Democratic Socialists of America. It's like he's already developing his list of demands for the administration at University of Virginia. So that would tell you a little something about him. But I'm just saying that, to me, is the energy that I am seeing right now with this electorate. We are tired of business as usual with the Democratic Party. And I think that there needs to be people are yearning for a more elevated, more passionate, a more a voice that really feels the challenges that people are going through right now. And they are tired of waiting for the traditional methodologies and the traditional lack of messaging of the Democratic Party. They want people who will speak truth to power and then actually get in there and fight for them. And the candidate that is able to express that and to be able to do it real authentically is the one that I think is going to make waves in the next presidential election.
Well, speaking of traditional Democrats, as we know, the testifying before the House Oversight Committee by Hillary Clinton and former President Bill Clinton is underway. Secretary Clinton testifying today in Chappaqua, where the Clintons live, Chappaqua, New York. President Clinton to testify tomorrow. She has already said, another 10 toes down moment, that she has no idea about Jeffrey Epstein's criminal activities in her, very kind of limited, interaction. As a matter of fact, she said, I don't really recall ever encountering him. She has nothing else to add. And these are reports. We have not seen the video, which of course will be eventually released. But I think, more broadly, what is your impression of this moment in the Epstein files, Avis?
Well, the thing that I find very interesting is why the Democrats are not jumping off. See, this is an example of the Democrats not fighting. Because on the very day that we had the State of the Union, it was released that there are specific known parts of the Epstein files that apparently justice has pulled back, and that specifically implicate Trump in sexual assault related to 13-year-old, a child. I have not heard the Democrats say anything significant about that yet. This makes Watergate look like it was just some sort of twinkle toe situation. I really don't understand why people aren't going buck crazy that there is somebody in the White House that is a pedophile. I would consider that that's illegal. If that happened, that is statutory rape. And from what was in the documents in terms of the interview that have now been disappeared by the Justice Department, this young lady alleges rape, not merely statutory rape, like rape by the President of the United States. Why are the Democrats moving on like that was nothing? If I was on the floor, honestly, I'd love my man, Al Green, but instead of holding up a photo that Black people aren't, or a sign that Black people aren't apes, why weren't they holding signs? Because you had Epstein survivors in the building. They did nothing to illustrate that. Why not hold up something to suggest that our president is a pedophile? I don't understand why they don't fight. And this is what makes the electorate so annoyed with them, because they have all the ammunition in the world and they refuse to use it.
I will say, to Avis's point, Marcus, I listen to, who has time to sit down and read a whole book these days with everything else happening? But I listened to the book by the Miami Herald reporter Julie K. Brown, Perversion of Justice, the Jeffrey Epstein story. And it was, and Lord knows I am not a squeamish person. The detail in the reporting of allegations is pearl clutching. Okay. There were times literally when I had to stop it and take a woosah moment and say, I'll start listening again tomorrow. But the specific allegation about the 13-year-old girl and sexual assault, the allegation of sexual assault by Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, that same girl, is in the book. And so when this came out last Friday, about these missing documents, once again, I had to say, bravo to Julie K. Brown. She a great reporter, but more to the point, Marcus, the whole thing is frightening. And like Avis said, this isn't an anti-Trump thing. This is an anti-sexual assault, anti-pedophile thing. Where are the people who work for DOJ who have children, who are in positions of power, who are still allowing this kind of stuff to happen? Am I naive in asking that?
Maybe. There's a harsh reality in this country about who matters and who doesn't. We've heard this said before. Who's too big to jail? Right? We heard Elizabeth Warren saying that after the financial crisis. There are entities and power and money in this world that is bigger than any of our moral power and authority. It's just that simple. The idea that you can have too big of a position to be able to speak up is giving them too much credit. They are making a choice. They do not believe in justice the way that we believe in justice. So when King said that it's a negative piece, it's the absence of tension, but a positive piece is the presence of justice, we don't have that. That is not, that moral compass was shot in the face and killed, right? So like the idea then that somehow after, what was that? Where all the kids got killed in the school, not Sandy Hook.
You're talking about in Texas at the...
Well, Sandy Hook was also one of them, right? But like all these school shootings.
Shooting, yes.
Right. You got all these school shootings. Yeah. Violence against women work has been going on for as long as any work has been happening. Beth Ritchie is coming up to Harvard in a few weeks to talk about her work. She was a part of the women's anti-violence movement in the 70s, back when the problem of domestic abuse was a private discussion as opposed to something that we talked about in the public sphere. And somehow after the Violence Against Women Act, we don't talk about anymore. So when we're talking about these young people, these young women being sexually assaulted and violence being done to them, and we think somehow because this is big enough, it's going to tip the scales. The scales don't tip at the top. They tip at the foundation. We have to break the foundation of this country, which says that people can get away with whatever they want if they're big enough. There's an argument to be made that the reason why Trump went to get to the White House is because he said, if I get that big, they'll never be able to stop me. Now, we let it happen when it's in business, but somehow now that he's got business and politics, we put it together, he's unstoppable. We got to figure out new ways because the whole idea that somehow people are going to have an epiphany and somehow they're going to change their mind. It's like if I go to work and I'm going to a faculty meeting and I want something done, I better have had those conversations before the meeting. Because if I'm going to the meeting hoping that everybody's just going to see it my way, I am sorely mistaken.
Yeah, that's interesting. You should say that because the thing that comes to mind, obviously, this example is not politics, but we all knew years ago with the Me Too movement that nobody was going to touch Harvey Weinstein.
That's right.
Until Harvey Weinstein was touched.
That's right.
And
right. 7 years. Bill Cosby, I think we knew about Bill Cosby in 2006. It wasn't until Hannibal Buress makes a joke in 2013. Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, Diddy, Trump, right? Like these names have been floated around for years. These are not problems that the people who run our society care to solve because they get paid.
My gracious. We will continue to watch this. Okay. Let us talk about the BAFTA controversy. The
mic
uttered by a man who had Tourette syndrome. He was in one of the movies that was up for an award. To be quite honest, I think we need to do a show on the Daily Drum about Tourette syndrome, and I think I'm going to talk to the boss about that too, because because there are so many. Here we are, almost a week later, and there's still so many questions, not only about what happened when Delroy Lindo and Michael P. Jordan were on stage. Take a moment, Avis. When I said Michael B. Jordan, I always have to give the sisters a moment to catch the breath. But Wakanda forever. Avis, help me here. There's just so much. Was it racism on BAFTA's part? Did they just not care about Black people to edit this out? There was a 2-hour delay.
Yeah, it is racism all up and through the British culture. So why am I surprised that it's at BAFTA? Now, this is the nation, by the way, that ran away a prince and his new bride because he happened to be bold enough to marry a Black woman. All right. And they called her everything in the book, while letting a pedophile remain in the royal family until just this past week. So let that sink in. So that lets you know what culture this institution is bathed in. And you're exactly right. They had a choice. They edited out Free Palestine. They edited out a homophobic slur, but they kept that one in. That was a choice. And then to come out with this non-apology that wasn't even directed at the people who were hurt. It was directed at the audience. I mean, how many mistakes can you make without people seeing what is clearly the truth? This is a racist institution that is bathed in a racist culture, and that's exactly what I would expect racists to do.
Yeah, Marcus, it's almost the apology. Non-apology was, you've heard it, I'm sure. If you're offended, I'm sorry you feel that way. Kind of an apology, not just, I was wrong, I apologize.
we live in a world that is allergic to accountability. There are systems, there are organizations, there are institutions, there are programs. The only people that have to be accountable are just that individual people that don't have enough power to not have to apologize. This is the reality. This is the world we live in. And unless we create institutions and communities and organizations that embrace accountability, unless we insist on only supporting those organizations that show a sense of care and commitment to each other, we will not see any of these places change. They are committed to their beliefs, and their beliefs are what we do matters. And when we upset you, that matters to you. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I was talking to a colleague earlier this week about the Tourette's syndrome situation, and she was much more well versed on it than I was. But one of the things that she did say, and this was a great analogy, because she said she has encountered other people with disabilities, and if you're visually impaired and you have a cane and you strike someone, you apologize, even though the person that you strike knows that you are visually impaired. If you are a paraplegic, you're in a wheelchair, it's obvious that you are in a wheelchair, but if you happen to roll over somebody's foot and that person says, ouch, your reaction is not, well, you see, I'm in this wheelchair. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. And
Yeah.
and any person of good character would be like, no problem. I accept your apology, and and everybody's trying to be more careful. But this,
I want to shout out Black people who
always.
We are, period. Happy Black History Month. We are committed to learning and growing as a people. And the moment that this happened, and a lot of our first thought was, why does this man do this? A lot of us learned in a heartbeat, in an instant, okay, he couldn't control it. He has these limitations, right? We went to that second level thinking like, okay, you have this thing. Maybe you have something to say here. We don't know what the man said or what he didn't say. We have heard that that Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo, two of the greatest actors of a generation across two different generations, said that nobody spoke to them. So I want to shout out Black people for really rolling with that and picking up the pace in the conversation. That being said, there's a question of power involved here. So do we know that these things can intersect, disability and racism? Absolutely. Now, the man himself, whose name I literally don't even know how little I'm thinking of him. I'm thinking of BAFTA and Britain, where white supremacy started. But the man himself said, "Why they sit me by the microphone?" I thought that was weird too. And I said, you know what, that is weird. Maybe they wanted a viral moment. Who knows at this point? But at the end of the day, we have to take care of the people who are hurt. I used to get in trouble all the time because when I would talk about, I used to, a little rough and tumble, rough around the edges. Yeah. And then it was a long time ago. And I learned about de-escalation and how important it was, because all these fights we was getting in, people die real easy, right? You fall down, hit your head, that's it. And so I learned these de-escalation techniques. And I found in these moments where people wanted me to step up and join the fight, I would de-escalate and they would be upset about that. And my thinking is, if somebody's hurt, we need to take care of them. That's the first thing that needs to happen. So for me, knowing that we do need to push back, we do need to fight, we do need to criticize people who are choosing violence against Black people every damn day. We need to focus and prioritize making sure that the people who are hurt by this are helped. And that, to me, looks like the two Black people who are on stage in that moment. It also looks like people in the disability community who have been fighting for justice for a very long time and not being paid no attention to. As we just saw a Black man in Minneapolis who died, a man who was hard of seeing. I don't know if he was fully blind, who dies because they drop him off 5 miles from his house and he speaks a language that no one speaks and he can't get home and he dies, right? Like, this intersection of disability and racism is something we've been talking about. And I hope this is a moment where we can invite people into that conversation, because that's where that healing begins.
I'm going to have to let that be the last word, although I am upset at both of you because you allowed me to say Michael P. instead of Michael B. Well,
I didn't want to say. I didn't want to say anything.
I am not too big where you can't correct me even on my show. Michael B. Jordan.
Man. Shout out to Michael P,
I thought
B,
you all loved me.
and J. Okay. Hey.
Oh my goodness. Hey, look.
I said I am not. I said maybe. Yeah. I said maybe I'm tripping.
No. Yeah, look, Lord knows I am not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver and Dr. Marcus Board, thank you both so much. I really appreciate your time. That is the Daily Drum for this Thursday, February 26th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.